Hello there, welcome everyone, and my name is Marco, and I'm a full stack developer. I haven't been posting on this channel for quite a while, almost over a month now, and I apologize for that, but it's been quite a busy month. I had a project with a friend of mine, and it came out pretty good actually. And if you're interested, I've used SvelteKit and Tailwind CSS, which I gotta admit was so much fun. And if you're interested, just let me know in the comments, and I will do certainly some videos and tutorials about it because it's just so much powerful. But we are here today to learn React. And so we're gonna learn React. So for today, I have something particular in mind, which is a step up from what I've done so far. Because when you're using frameworks and libraries, React, Angular, Vue, whatever, you actually, the most basic stuff that you can do is actually consuming data from an API. And today we're going to do just that. We're going to use the Marvel API to build, basically to fetch heroes and to look for them and to read some description and to show them on the screen, on the web page. Something very simple, but that can be really expanded. The imagination is really the limit here. Now, what can you learn from a project like this? I'd say that this is an intermediate level project because, of course, the concept of components is always going to be there, but now we're going to work with two things. One is, as I said, APIs, so consuming data from an API, parsing those data and showing them nicely on the page. And secondly, we're going to work with routing through like React routers. Of course, it's going to be like different from a server-side render route. These are going to be client-side. It's a whole different story, and there is so much to say about this. But these are the fundamental things that you can learn from a project like this one. So as I said, we're going to use the Marvel API, and to be honest, it's not the easiest to set up. So I decided to split this video into parts. The first part is going to show you how to set up and make requests to this API, which again, it's not the easiest one. I'm not the biggest fan of how it is all organized. And the second part is actually going to be the coding part, building the web application. This being said, let's start coding. Okay, so the first step that we need to navigate through this API documentation is go to the website, which is developer.marvel.com, and basically you're presented with this opening page, which basically has everything. So the first thing I suggest you to do is to create an account. Of course, I've already created mine, but you need to create an account and you need to verify your email address. I mean, it's something that you've already done somewhere, sometime for sure. Once you did that, you can come here back and go to the how-tos, and we can start with the getting started information. Now, I like to start from this because if they provide it, there must be a reason. And the first thing that you notice is that you have a list of things like a checklist. And the first thing that we want to do is to get an API key. Now let's do this first. I'm going to open it in a new page, and this is basically my developer account. Now this is going to be my username, and I'm given a public key and a private key, and this is exactly what you want to keep secret. I'm told that I have 3,000 requests per day, which is fine. This is default, I guess. It's a list of domains, but you don't need to change anything. And then you just fill this is misspelled, maybe the test project. Update. Beautiful. Just give the name of your project, of the project you're working on. Now, these keys are quite important and you want to keep them secret. Of course, the public key is going to be exposed at some point because you make a request from React, but the secret is going to be the private key is going to remain private, and you'll see how we can authenticate in this. It's a bit complicated, and for my taste it's a bit too complicated, but I think that in terms of safety and security they hit the sweet spot. Then, after you create the API key, you're basically good to go. But you need to be a good API citizen. And so you need to abide by the terms of use. Of course, I mean, if you have time, just read it. And then you need to link back. This is quite important because I think it's something to do with attribution and stuff. And if I go here, attribution and linking guidelines, you got rate limits, tip for staying within rate limits. You are told that you can cache results, but not indefinitely. Yeah, that makes sense because you're basically stealing data. And you can cache them for 24 hours max, I think. So if you're wondering what caching is basically, since you have 3,000 requests per day, maybe you foresee a visit on a traffic on your website way higher than that, but maybe the 2,000 people request the same exact superhero that makes the exact same query. You don't want to all the time hit the endpoint with the same exact query, so you just cache the result. So you basically save it locally in your cache, and you provide that without making a call. That will save you a lot of calls, and that is the way to go. Actually, if you want to implement an application that serves like a lot of traffic, it's not the case that we're seeing now, but if you plan to do so, and I hope that your application will have a lot of traffic, this is the path to follow. And I think the other thing is, attribution. The text on every application screen or web page which display the API results, it needs to have this. Yeah, this is basically something that we need to add. And we're gonna put a link back to this address, I'd say. Yeah, marvel.com. Yeah, this is the basic attribution rules that I am ready to follow. Then keep in touch. Tell us about what you're building. This is probably some statistics, some form. And build cool stuff, which is what we are going to do. Okay, so enough with getting started. We can start actually seeing, first of all, how we manage authorization. So how we authenticate when we want to make a request. So we go to authorization. And as I said, it's not the easiest one to follow, but it's not super complicated, but it is a bit odd. So first of all, you need to pass a parameter, which is API key. It's not comma case, so make sure that it's not comma case. And this represents basically the public key that you're given in your account. Then you have two different systems of authentication, like client side, which is not our case, and server side. We're not going to work with a server, but we're actually making a request from another website, so we want to use this. And to use this, we have this endpoint, the gateway.marvel.com. Every route starts with v1 and then public and then the endpoint that you want to hit. And in this request, we need to pass two additional parameters. One, they call it TS, and it's a timestamp. Why is it a timestamp? You're going to see it in a second. The second one is the hash, which is an MD5 digest. MD5 is just an hash algorithm. And this is quite important because it basically represents a combination, a string concatenation of the timestamp, the private key, and the public key. And this is important. The order in this case is very important because you don't want to mess it up. So the final result in the request should be that you have a TS, timestamp, you have the API key, which is your public key, and the hash, which is a combination of the timestamp, the API key, and the private key. Now, why do they put like a timestamp here? So the MD5 algorithm is quite predictable. And if someone was to like get that hash all the time you make a request, eventually, if that TS doesn't change, they will discover your private key. They will figure out what private key that is you're basically using, because the MD5 always generate the same output for the same input. Therefore, if you use a timestamp in this case, and a timestamp can be everything like in seconds and milliseconds, and if you think about it, every second is going to be different. And even if you use like milliseconds, every millisecond, the timestamp is going to be different. So that makes it more secure. And then you got the authorization errors, like you got a 409, which I have no idea why they put a 409, which is a conflict. If you're missing the API key, I would have put like a 400, which is a bad request, but I'm not the backend developer on this project, so I don't care. And then you got the 401, which is unauthenticated, and the 405, which is very odd. It's like method not allowed, and a 403 is forbidden. And this is it for authorization. Now, we actually want to make a request. But where do we make a request? Well, this is a good point, and they offer a very, very nice interactive documentation where, if it loads, you have a list of basically all the endpoints they provide where you can actually make a request. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. So if you plan in any way to make an application, you have a lot of possibilities here, because you got the stories endpoint. It fetches a list of stories, the series, the events, even the creators. For today's purposes, I'm just gonna focus on these two endpoints, the characters, and the second one, which is gonna be the details about the characters. And if I click on it, I can actually see the entire model and schema of the response object, which is exactly what I want, because this explain to me what I should expect as a response object. And if I click on model schema, I got the entire schema. So basically I will receive a code, which is an integer. And if I don't know what this code is, I just go to the model and say, yeah, code. It's the HTTP status code of the return result. So basically it's going to be like 200 if it goes well. And then I got a status, which is a string description of the call status, which is going to be okay in this case. So 200, okay. And then this bunch of stuff. The important stuff is data, this one, because this is where the data are coming from. We're gonna have an offset and a limit, and this is to make subsequent requests, because I think you cannot get more than 100 or maybe 50 or 100 results per request. And the main results are going to be stored in this key, the results, which is a list, and a list of characters basically. There's going to be an ID, and this is very important when we have to eat the subsequent, the next endpoint with the ID of the character. There's going to be the name, the description, the resource URI, which I think is what you should link to, and for the attribution. You got the URLs, and you got the thumbnail. This is what we want. And also we're gonna get a bunch of stuff that we don't really care. This is actually quite important, because this will show the image. Now, how do we request the image? When we put the image as an HTML element, you know that you have a source, and that source can be a local path or a URL. They provide a path, and they provide the extension. And this is actually the next thing I want to talk about. Oh, by the way, the next endpoint is going to be the character ID. And this is basically the same, has almost the same schema, but it returns just the result of one character. And also, and this is quite important, it says the various parameters that we can use in the query. And for today, we're going to use this one, the name starts with, because it returned characters with names that begin with the specified string, which is exactly what we want. In terms of images, we need to go to another place in this documentation. As I said, this is quite thorough, but it's a little bit maybe overwhelming. If I go to images, I get the explanation of how I need to put the source for getting the image. This is basically the response that I will get in the thumbnail. I will have a path that looks like this, and then an extension, which is JPEG or PNG or JPEG, whatever. What I need to do is to append this extension to this request. So basically the request in the source is going to be yada 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 dot JPEG. Or, and this is where they explain here, you can append the variant name to the path element. What is the variant name? Well, they provide a lot of resolutions for the image. Let's say that I want this one, the portrait uncanny, which is 300 by 450. I need to basically make the request with the entire path slash the portrait. In this case, they ask for the X large. I will ask for the portrait uncanny, and then dot the extension, and I will get image. If I don't do that, if I just append to what I get in the response .jpeg, I will get the full resolution image, which is okay, I guess. But in terms of data consumption, you might want to request a smaller image, especially if you think that you're gonna use it in like small thumbnails, which is what we are going to do. This being said, I think I've said everything. And of course, I encourage you to go here. It's a very comprehensive documentation. It's quite, probably it's too broad for my taste, but I strongly encourage you to read it all, especially if you plan to create something very, very big with this, something professional. And don't forget to abide by their terms of use rules and don't expose your keys. That is probably number 1 and number 2 rules to follow. This being said, we can start looking at some code. Okay, so I have VS Code open in front of me and it's quite blank and it can be intimidating, but we have a powerful tool for this, which allows us to create a React app, and it's called Create React App. So in your terminal, just type npx create React app like this, and then a dot, so that it's gonna create the folder and all the dependencies in this folder. It's gonna take a while, so relax and chill out for a second. Okay, we are back. I hope you finished your cup of tea or whatever you were drinking. And at the end of the script, we should have a structure like this. We have a public folder, there is a bunch of stuff, and an src folder where there is even more stuff. Now, to be quite honest, we don't need all this stuff, so I'm just gonna clean up a little bit. So the readme, definitely we don't need it. Setup test, and this, maybe the logo, yeah. App.test, we don't need this, and well, I'm gonna just leave the rest as it is. I'm just gonna delete. Move to trash, yes. Okay, what's left to do in the app? Yeah, we got a bunch of stuff here and we can see if everything works. I don't think it will because we removed some stuff. So maybe from here we need to remove this because it doesn't exist. And this as well. Let's hit save. And in the app.js, we can remove this one as well, you know? Yeah, we're gonna use the index and that's it. But now we need to remove it from the app, which is here. Nice. Let's hit save. And this is the basic thing that we're gonna have. Okay. If I want to start a dev server, I just type npm start, and this should start something on my local server. And of course, it will take some time, but wow. Yeah, this is because there is no styling, but basically there is everything. Let's go back to the code and let's remove all this stuff because we don't want it. There's not even a class name, who cares? For now, we're just gonna have a div that says typical hello world. Why not? And I'm gonna go in the CSS and I'm gonna delete everything. Now, yes, we have it. Now, the goal of these videos is not the CSS, so you'll excuse me if I just copy paste what I've written here. I'm gonna explain it like while I do it, but basically, yeah, the CSS is pre-written. I'm gonna upload this code on GitHub for like entirely, so you can look at the CSS right in there if you are interested. And now we should look at something totally different. There is no marginal border because I removed it, but basically we're gonna see it coming through. Okay, so let's start creating a file in the root folder, and I'm gonna call it .env. And this is where we are going to store our environment variable. This is quite important because as a framework, it's not a framework, but working on the front end, we are going to have to deal with secrets that we don't want to expose, like when we upload this to GitHub or something. And it is possible to pass environment variables. Since we are using Create React App that in the background uses Webpack to bundle everything, we need to start our environment variable with React App and then the name of variable. I just want to give it a base URL and React app. I'm gonna have an API key. This is gonna be my public key. And there's also gonna be a private key. Now, of course, in here, you are going to have your own keys. Okay, so around this point, my audio decided to quit and live for another planet. So I'm gonna do a voiceover. I hope that's okay. But basically, I'm gonna comment the code. And what I'm doing now is setting the environment variables. Again, it's very important to do so because especially when you're dealing with a front-end framework, whatever that is, you want to have some environment variables to keep secret. Of course, some of these environment variables will be exposed during the request, but this is the list that you can do. And also, if you try to push a code like this on GitHub, you're gonna receive an email with basically a warning saying you are exposing some environment variables and you shouldn't do so. Okay. We are back in the app component, which is the main component, and I'm gonna do some magic for sure. Okay, right here I am installing the React router. And just do an npm i react router DOM, and this will actually give me the React router, which is quite important actually. Nice. Now that that is installed, and I have it here in the dependencies, version 6. Yeah, that's quite important. What I want to do is import it, and I need to import actually 3 things, and you'll see what. The first thing is the browser router, which I'm gonna recall router. If I can spell it, yeah, okay, router, here we go. Then I need to import the routes, and then the route, and everything will come from React router DOM. Nice. Now that I have this, the way React router works is that you need to wrap everything around the router. So basically, I'm gonna use it to wrap everything, all my components, let's say, and my routes inside it. So I create a router component. Inside, I will create routes. Those are the only things that I want to keep in the routes, because there are some things that you might want to display in all pages, and those are going to be outside the routes because they don't depend on the route itself. One big example is like a navbar. You want to display the same navbar in all of your pages, so that is going to be put outside, as you will see like later. I'm gonna create a route, actually 2 routes for explaining the thing. Now I'm setting the to property, which is not correct, and you'll see why it's not working. This actually should be a path, and to is reserved to a link, but I'm gonna figure it out in a bit, so don't worry. The other prop that a route component receives is actually the element, and the element is the component that you want to show in that route. In this case, for the slash route, I want to display the home component, and I'm gonna put it. Whereas in the about, I will show the about component. Nicely done, Marco. Now this thing, of course, it won't work because I don't have neither the home and the about component. And as you can see, the console like just error out. In my src folder, I will create a routes folder. Now this is quite important because even if I call it routes, it's not a reserved name. I could have called it whatever, like Frank, for instance. React doesn't really care about it. This is just for my self-organization. Like I know that in the routes, I'm not gonna have like pure components, but my components will be assembled in there. So they have more organization, more flexibility like this. But pay attention because React doesn't really care about that. If you think about other frameworks like Next.js, that supports routing, and so you will have a route folder, and Next.js will look for that to dynamically create routes. This is not the case. So inside my routes folder, I will create basically components that are going to be handlers for the other components. And of course, I'm gonna have my home.jsx, and just as an example, I'm gonna have my about.jsx. Now RFC is like a shortcut, and you can use it if you have the VS Code extension for React. It's quite convenient because it basically creates a component which has an export of default. It's neat, and it really saves you a bit of time, especially when you need to basically code the same thing all the time. So now I have two components, and I'm going to import them. This is very important. Naturally, I would import it like this from routes. Nice. And this is going to be about. Yeah, my typing skills are off the charts. Now, the server should work. Let's see if that's true. Yes, it does. And if we go and look, of course there is nothing showing up. And now I'm starting to realize that it's not a to, but it's a path. And there it is. So just change it to path, and now it would work as expected. I'm in the about page, so I will see about, but if I go to the home page, I will see home. Neat. Now we can start thinking about building our components. And the first component that I want to build is the navbar. For organization, I'm gonna create a folder of components, and inside here, I'm gonna have my first component. Now, this is a very subjective thing, because of course, React is not a very opinionated type of library, so you can really build the components as you wish. My suggestion is to try and keep it as consistent as possible. Of course, there is no right or wrong, but there are things that might be considered better than others. So for instance, just to build an entire component out of the app, all in one place, you can do it, but definitely it's not the best solution. And also the opposite is not the best solution. So basically grab each HTML element and wrap it around a React component, because that would be like too atomic in my opinion. I would keep the reusability of the component in mind, but there are some things that really, you're gonna use once in your website, and the navbar is one of those things. So I usually have a component for my navbar. I've seen people do create the navbar and then the nav item, and like this it becomes more reusable, becomes more modular, because you can add nav items, etc. But for this one, I'd say we can go with a blank navbar. So to create the most basic navbar, I'm just gonna have a header element and then a nav element, and inside I am just going to put an unordered list with a list item. And of course I'm gonna fight a bit with VS Code shortcuts, Hammett shortcuts, which are super useful, but you need to, dig a bit. That's better. And of course for now I'm gonna have a /route, which is gonna bring me home, and the about, which is gonna bring me to the about page. I'm just gonna give it a class name, and I remind you, the CSS for this project is already written, so basically I'm just giving a class name and the style is coming through. What is left to do now? Well, I need to import it in app.js. So I will import it as a component, of course, because it is. And I will put it outside routes, because this is something that I want to be able to see in all the pages. So it's not gonna be part of the route. I could have put it outside router as well. And so I now see it up there, and if I click to the about, it brings me to the about. Home brings me back home. So the router and the navbar now works. I think we can start moving on. Let's create the route that we are interested in, which is the hero details. This is going to be the route that actually is going to show the details about our hero. And we are going to do the same as the about. Now I want to create a dynamic route, and to do so in React, but in all cases, you need to use a colon. So I'm going to do a slash and colon ID. And this will basically say whatever comes after the slash, you take that with a key of ID. And that is important because I can have access to that particular parameters in the URL. We're gonna render that component, and we're also gonna eliminate the about because we don't care about it. See what I did there? And of course, we're gonna eliminate that link because it doesn't bring us anywhere. And now, whatever I write behind the slash, like 1, 2, 3, it's gonna bring me to the hero details. So routing is working, and that's good news. That's good news. Actually, the first thing I want to build is a container component. Now, this is we can call it a utility component. Maybe you want to differentiate this. But what it does is just export, or it returns a div or a main, which is a block element anyway, with a class of container, so that I can have it in my repertoire, let's say. Actually, to create something like this is quite convenient, because this is super reusable. I can use it in another page. I can use it if my website has like 10 pages. Instead of rewriting the same thing with the same class, I just use this component. Now, how can I represent every component that I put inside this? Well, React, for every component, passes a prop that is called children. And what the children are, is basically all the different elements that you put inside. So if you put it inside an H1 or a paragraph or another div or another component, that will be rendered inside there. And you just need to specify it with the curly brackets, and you just say children. Make sure to write it inside the curly brackets. Yeah, like this. Nice. Once this is done, I'm gonna import it, like as a component, of course. Not that it changes, but just for my own reference. And I'm gonna put it on the page. Of course, I will render something inside it. And for this one, I'm gonna render like a title or something. And you can see that everything is shifted because now I have my container class. And you can see there is a main with a class of container. Next one, I think, is the search bar, which is going to be the main entry point for our query. I tend to use JSX for all the components and JavaScript like JS for the utilities, but this is really, it's not really important. You can still use JS if you want for components. It's just for me because I know that a component is a component. So the search bar is just going to be a form with one input, and the input is going to be of type text so that I can write on it. And I think I can put a placeholder. Yeah, I put a placeholder. And then very simply a button. This is, super simple component. We can put it whatever we want. Send, search, launch, your choice. Now that we have the input element, we need to create a reference to this element because we need to basically extract its value, whatever the user is gonna input inside. And we can use the useRef hook in React. The useRef hook, I find it more convenient than the useState, because right now you're gonna bind it with, we can call it binding, with the ref keyword. And so you just make a reference to this particular HTML element, and this will grant you basically a reference to the element itself, so you can extract its value. And the typing and the update is all managed by the HTML, not by React. So this is not by definition a controlled component. But that's good, because every time that I change something, if this were a control component, every time I change something in the actual input, I would need to re-render the component. And I find it so inconvenient, honestly. But like this, I can just type something in and HTML is gonna take care of it. I can put a title. Yeah. If I type something in, HTML is gonna take care of it, so that's fine. And this is not controlled by React. There is not a retrigger of components. However, I have access to its value thanks to the useRef hook, to the reference. Let's create another component called grid, and this falls in the same category as a container. This is basically just an HTML element with a class name on it. And in this case, the name is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be a grid, and I'm going to lay all the different results inside this grid. It's quite useful to create these utility type of components. At least I think it is. Again, just remember to pass the children props. And inside you can pass the children. This is going to have a class name of grid, and it's going to be linked to a CSS class that just gives this container like a grid type of layout. I'm gonna import it, of course. I'm just gonna put it below the search bar. This is where the results are going to be displayed, basically. Inside I need something, so basically it's children, and I can create whatever. I'm gonna create some divs, and you can really create whatever you want. Everything inside this grid is gonna be shown with a grid layout. Like this, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, very, very interesting. Now back in the search bar, because now that I have basically my home built out, I need to build the most important thing, which is the function to trigger when I search something. Basically, I push the button. So basically, back in the home component, I'm gonna import a powerful hook, which is called the useState hook, and it's fundamental to manage state. Now, in React, you can use state and data interchangeably. They are basically the same thing. And to do so, when you're using the useState hook, you will have access to two things. The first one, which I called heroes, it's the actual variable, the actual value. Whereas the second one, the setHeroes, it's the function to change that value. And you want to use that function because otherwise you're not going to trigger a re-render of the component itself. And what happens if you don't trigger a re-render? Well, basically you're not going to see any changes in the component itself. So think about a counter. If you change the counter just like changing its variable, you're not going to see it displayed on the component because the state of that component will be fixed. The function provided by the useState is actually needed to change it. One good news is that I can pass this function to the search bar. And remember, every time I pass something, I can only do so, like state and data and props, I can only do so from parent to child. There is no way for me to, unless we're using maybe a context manager, a context API, to pass the variable or the function from a child to its parent. So basically I'm passing the setup function, which is going to set the heroes object, or the hero's data to the search bar, and I'm gonna bind an event to the button, which is the onClick, and I'm gonna call it just end of click. And this function, I can actually write it inside the component itself. Yeah, so basically just creating an arrow function that takes the event because it's linked to an event. In this case, the click event. So first thing first, I'm gonna initialize a value. And as I said, we have reference to the input element. And to access its value, we're gonna select current and then value. Value is the actual property of the HTML element. The reason why I use .current is because the useRefug actually returns an object, and the object is like current equal something. So this is an edge case. So if the value is an empty string, so you leave the search bar like without anything, I'm not gonna waste a request for that. So I just blank return. Otherwise, I'm gonna put this in a try-catch block. And I'm gonna say that heroes, and I'm gonna await this function that of course doesn't exist anymore, but I'm gonna create it. This function is going to take the value, and the value in this case is just going to be like the initials, the name. How does the name starts, for instance. The second step here is of course to set the heroes as the new object, and I'm going to use the setter function that comes from the parent to set the heroes variable in the parent itself. This is the only way you can do it if you're not using the context API, if you're not using a context manager in general. As in all cases, when you're working with an asynchronous function and the await syntax, you want a try-catch block. And for now, I'm just gonna console error the error, just to have that information, just to have some information. Now I think we need to create the fetch heroes function, and I'm gonna do it in a folder that I'm gonna call utilities or utils or lib. Call it whatever you want. I mean, this is my type of organization, but you can really do whatever you want. This time I'm gonna give it a JS extension because it's not a component, it's actually JavaScript. I'm gonna create an arrow function called fetch heroes. This is not how you initialize an arrow function, Marco. Yeah, that's better. So you have a value. First thing first, I want to set the URL. So basically, where do I want to make the request to? It's gonna be a string literal so that I can interpolate some like different stuff. And I'm gonna get the API URL, and I'm gonna get it from the environment variable. And then if you remember, to hit the characters endpoint, we need to specify v1, then public, then characters. Yeah, I think it's in the documentation. Yeah, right there. Nice. So of course I'm gonna get the API URL from the environment variable. And to do so, you can access environment variable in React with the process.env. So process.env and then the name of the variable, of course. And if you don't remember, this is basically the getaway.marvel.com, which is the endpoint they suggest you use. Now I need 3 more pieces of data. One is the timestamp, which is a TS, and I'm gonna use, of course, the current data, and I'm gonna transform it to a string so that I can interpolate it, like concatenate it with other stuff. And this is gonna be unique for every second, basically. Then I will need my public key, so the API key. And this is coming from the environment variables as well. And last but not least, I need the private key. This is all that is required to make a request. From the documentation, this is basically everything that is required. Now there must be some processing, because we need to basically create the hash. And so we're gonna need the hash as well. To generate it, we're just gonna use a function that we are going to create. Let's call it getHash. And this is going to take basically the 3 different arguments that that are needed to create the hash. Once I had all of those, I can compose my URL so that I can start making my request. So we will start from the base, which is the Euro URL, which I think it's a base URL. It's much better. Nice. And then we introduce query parameters, so we need a question mark. The first one is the timestamp, so TS is going to be equal to TS. That's pretty straightforward. Then it's the API key. Which is the public key. And then the hash itself. And then of course we need the initials of the name, because the endpoint requires it, otherwise you're not gonna get anything. Like if you look at the documentation, you have the name starts with, which returns the characters that have a name that starts with this. And this is going to be taken from the value, of course. Now that we've done everything, we are going to basically make the request, and we're going to use the fetch API. So we're going to have a response, and we're going to await for the response of this request. The response needs to be processed and transformed into JSON, so we're gonna await this as well. And we are actually going to return this data. Otherwise, we're just gonna return a blank, nothing. We could also return the error actually. Yeah, it's better. Maybe return the error. Don't even look at this now. Just return the error. So now it does fail because we don't have the getHash function. Now to crypt this in a MD5 digest, we need the crypto.js package that we're going to install. Okay, once it is installed, I can import it in my utility.js file, and I will import the MD5, which is all capital letters. Yep. And I'm gonna create my getHash function, which will basically just return the MD5. I could have just used the MD5, but I like to wrap it around my own function. So basically just return a digest of that thing. Now, in this case, the order is important because, and this actually caused me quite a few bugs. They want the timestamp, then the secret key, then the public key, and it's not like Don't confuse like the public key and the secret key. Otherwise, you're not gonna get the results you expect. Just for reference, let's try and console log the data. This is something that I usually always do because it gives me a good feedback if I'm receiving the correct stuff. And actually in this case, it will show that I'm not receiving the correct stuff. And you know why? Because this should be an async function and I'm not doing that. Yep. Of course, we need to export it, and we are using it in the search bar itself, so we can import it here. I must admit, I'm not the best at naming things. You can even put it like index.js instead. Maybe you save yourself some, I don't know, some typing. And as a matter of fact, now I understand that it's not working because I need an async function. Nice. Let's see what happens when I request Hulk. Of course there is a problem. Now this is not really a problem, it's not a bug or anything. You basically just need to restart the server because I am introducing environment variables, and to make sure that they work, you need to restart the server so that Webpack can just pick them up. So this is a very simple thing. You just basically restart the server, Ctrl C, then npm start again. So inspecting, and if I try and make a request now, I see something coming in, and those are my data actually. And they exactly look like how they should look like. There is a 200 status code, yeah, and the status is okay, which, yeah, that's it. And there is also the data. It's a limit of 20, and these are the results. So for Hulk, we have 9 results, and it's a list. This is quite important because we can loop over it. Now that I know this, I can basically copy paste this function. I could have done it in one, maybe in a more conservative way. You can if you want, but now this function will actually fetch 1 hero. So it's not gonna go by name, but it's gonna have the ID basically at the end of the endpoint. Yeah, it's gonna hit that endpoint. Everything is basically the same, and this is probably the reason why you should keep one function, but yeah. Sue me. Of course, we need to export it. Nice. Now we can start creating our cards, which is basically where the data are going to be displayed, which is basically, yeah, a card, like the image and then the name. Don't think of anything too complex. Basically in the component, I'm just going to create the card component, the JSX, using my handy-dandy shortcut. I'm gonna import the link from React Router. Now this is not really necessary because basically what the link does, it wraps your whatever element you put inside in an anchor tag, but you can do it yourself, but you can also do it like this. So basically what I'm doing now is I'm wrapping around everything around the link. So the image and the div and everything, when you click on it, it's gonna be a link. I'm gonna have my image inside, and the source is going to be one prop. So I'm gonna have to pass a source to this card component. And then of course there's going to be like a name, and this is going to be a prop as well. You can think of props as parameters that you pass into a function, because actually that's what they are. I am passing, like if you consider a component like a JavaScript function, the props are the parameters that you pass into the function. Of course, there are some parameters that you don't see because React does it itself. For instance, children, but that's another story. Right here, I specify where the link should link to with the to parameter, and of course, it's going to link to the ID of the hero in this case. And where do I take the ID? Well, this is going to be another prop. So now this card is very reusable because I can basically generate let's say an infinite number, because I just need a few props. So I need the thumbnail of the image, I need the name of the hero that I want to display, and I need the ID because I need to create the route, basically. Not create the route, but link it to the correct route. Let's import a card component. And right here now, we need to do a few things. So right now the state or the data, mainly heroes, it's empty. There is nothing. When you load the page, you still haven't typed anything. But I want to do something. So what I'll do is that if I have heroes, so if that variable is not empty, I will create like a cards element. No, it's not an element, it's a variable, a cards element, and this is going to be populated. Now remember that when we said in the data that we receive back, the results, it's actually an array, and we can use the map method over the array. And in the map method, we have access to each individual hero, and we can create the card and pass the prop that we need, because we have the hero ID, or the hero name in this case, and we pass it like hero.name. We have the ID. We are gonna use, we're gonna put a key, and this is something that React actually requires when you have many of the same component inside a page. It requires a key, and this is because for re-rendering and keeping track of the virtual DOM. And then of course the thumbnail. Now the thumbnail, it's a little bit trickier because we need to compose it, and it's definitely not like this, but we need to compose it because we need the path and the extension. And in this case, we also want not the original resolution, but a smaller resolution, so that we don't load too many pictures at once, like high resolution pictures at once. And if you look at the images here, we can grab the Portrait Fantastic, which is 168 by 252. That's more than enough just to display a small thumbnail. And if you remember, like, we need to basically append a slash, then Portrait Fantastic, then the extension, so JPEG, PNG, whatever. So now here I have the path. I'm gonna, you can do it, but I'm gonna put global variable, like an image size. Yeah, it's that one, correct. And then I'm gonna use it there. So basically I put the image size, and then the dot, and the extension. Inside the grid, what I can do is verify that the cards is not none. So basically, if there are cards, to display, I will render the cards. Otherwise, it's gonna be either like null or an empty string, basically nothing. Remember that the heroes will be populated when we click on the search bar, because when you click on the search bar, you're gonna trigger the setter function, which takes from the set heroes and it's gonna populate the heroes. So in here, I can decide basically what gets returned. Nothing gets rendered. But if I select Hulk, I'm gonna have a bunch of errors, of course. And that's, yeah, well, that's the data. Now I want to give you a small spoiler here, and it's the fact that I'm not returning the correct thing. Because, yeah, I'm returning the data, which is the entire object, and I just want to return the list, because I'm actually looping through. So the heroes must be the list. And I can get access to it like this. So data.data.results. Not seeing anything, don't be worried. It's that I've put it in the wrong function. We're gonna put it in the right function now. But these are the things that happen very often when you're coding. Like small bugs, they really take you a bit of time to understand. Basically, this is the wrong function. This is the fetch hero. I should have put this in the fetch heroes, which I'm gonna do right now. Now if I print it, I will see the list. As a matter of fact, I do, with 9 results. Now the problem is another one. Why isn't that showing up in the grid? I should have the results in the grid. And this is another problem with coding. So in the map function, I'm using actually curly brackets to return the cards, and that is not correct. I should use parentheses. When I'll do, the results will show up. Now I changed the parentheses, which is what I was supposed to do, and now everything should work. If I look for the Hulk will show up, and look at this. Man, the Hulk. Here's my favorite character, by the way, because he's a genius, but he's also like a beast. He's a monster, but it's part genius, part monster. I mean, he's a lovable guy, but he's a beast. He's a lovable guy also as a beast. I mean, at least for me. But anyway, the important thing is that when you click on it, you actually have access to the ID. And this brings us to the next step, which is going to build basically the detail page. Now for the detail page, we can reorganize a few stuff, and I'm probably gonna do everything in one page because there are not many components here. So the only thing that I want to display, I mean, there are a lot of information. There is a lot of information that you can display with this because the Marvel API returns a lot of stuff. But I'll keep it simple, and I will just return the image, of course, the name, the description, and the series the hero belongs to or appears in. To begin with, I import the useParams hook from React Router, and this allows me to get access to the parameters, because if you remember, I have the ID inside the URL parameters, and I can get access to it just by destructuring. Yes, good, and using the useParams. Nice. Will it work? Let's test it out. I always recommend you to test things when you're doing it, because sometimes maybe you get a bug and you have no idea where it comes from, and then you realize that the input that you should get is actually wrong. So try it. So I type 123 and I get 123. So I'm getting the correct thing. I need to import the fetch hero because right now I want to just fetch one. And if you remember, it takes the ID as a parameter. And also I want to import two states, two hooks. One is the use state, and the other is the use effect. You will see these two hooks used in combination quite often, and actually in more, let's say, advanced project, you can actually create your own hooks, like custom hooks. And these two will come up very often, especially when you're working with APIs, because basically what the use state does, it's keep tracks of your data, the state in your component, and the use effect will allow you to run a particular function dependent on variables. You can make it dependent on some variables called dependencies, or without any dependency. So basically what it will do, it will run the function once and that's it. Right now is the behavior that I want. I want to run the function once when the component loads or when the component mounts, and that's it. Okay, so the use state is going to keep track of my state, so the data in my component, which in this case is the hero. And remember, the set hero is the function that I have to use to change the state. Now the question might be, do I really need to have the use state in this case? And I'd say yes, because there might be like no result from the API for whatever reason, and you don't want to create like a huge breakdown because something didn't work in the request. Once that is done, you're going to use the use effect hook, which takes a function. Inside this function, you basically run something, and I'm going to run the fetch hero. Now, fetch hero is an asynchronous function, but you cannot use the async await syntax in use effect. Instead, I'm going to use the .then notation, because after all, I need an asynchronous type of events. Here I'm going to return the data. These data need to be, well, actually don't need to be anything, because I'm gonna pass it as it is. And I'm gonna basically set my state with the new data. Now, what I'm doing here is actually wrong, because the fetch hero already returns the data.data.results, but I'm gonna figure it out. This is very common when you're working on these things. So I'll always like to put some conditional state, some conditional rendering. So if the hero doesn't exist, just return, don't do anything. Otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna render like the container. I could have used the container component here, but this is like a larger container. And then I'm gonna basically structure the way I want to show my data. I'm gonna have my image, of course. The way I pictured it is like I want it to be responsive, but when it's large, I will have them side by side. So we'll have two divs. One in this case is the hero details container. No, one in this case is the image itself, and the other one is all the text. They're gonna be side by side, but they're gonna have a property like a display of flex, and they're gonna have a flex wrap, which will make them go one above the other when the screen gets too small, which makes it responsive. I need to compose the URL. So basically, if you remember, right now I want the full resolution. I don't care about other resolutions, and to do so I just need to chain the path to the extension. That's it. So basically whatever it is, .jpeg or .png. Then I'm gonna have another div. This is gonna be side by side with the image, and this is gonna be the actual hero details. So basically all the text. And I can have an h4 with name, of course. and I'm gonna show the hero.name. Now in this case you can say, Marco, if I don't have any hero, like if the object is still undefined, this thing is going to explode. And as a matter of fact it won't, because if you look above, I specifically said if there is no hero, just return. So this part will not even be like rendered or processed. If we are here, it means that we have a hero, so there is no risk of not having like a hero. The only thing that I'm checking is that if I have a description, because not all heroes have description for some particular reason. And so I'm just checking if there is, basically render like a fragment that is called a React fragment with the description inside. Otherwise you just don't show anything. Inside the details I want another div, and this time is for the series. Again, you can display whatever you want. There is so much stuff in this API that it's overwhelming, but you can really display whatever you want. Here I'm just gonna display the series, and actually you can make a link out of this series, because there are API points like for the series as well, so you can really do whatever you want. But here I'm just gonna display plain and simple with an unordered list. I'm gonna have a list item for each one. So if you remember, like this series is a list. Actually it's not a list, maybe I need to get into the items, I think. The series and then items, and that is a list. And then you have a resource URI and a name, and I will have to access that name, but that's fine. And the results is a list as well, so I'll need to do that, but that is wrong, you'll see why. So I go into the items. Now this is a list, I can loop over it. I have access to the map method. I have access to each individual series, and I have no idea what is the singular of series. And I'm going to render a list item, just a simple list item. So I get access to s.name, and actually we do need a key, because and for now I'm just gonna do some random stuff. What this does, it's basically gonna give me a number between 0 and 1000, which is never 1000. It is supposed to be unique. Now everything should work, but it won't, because there is one important error in this code, and you'll see which one. Well, this is not the error I was talking about. This is just mistyping, because I'm basically saying just description. No, right there. You need to hero.description. Good, Marco, good. This is not the error I was talking about. The error is actually... Now if let's try it. Nothing shows up. And when this happens, you want to inspect your console and see the errors. And it says, hey, I don't have anything as results. Why? Well, because did you figure it out? We need to inspect the fetch hero function. We are already returning the results. That is the error. And the only thing that I need to do here is just take the first element. That was the mistake. Now it should work. Does it? Let's see. Oh yeah, it does. But there are a lot of requests, and that is because I forgot another thing. I forgot the dependencies on the use effect. So basically, with an empty array, you're saying there are no dependencies. So you just run once, But if you leave it, every time you fetch new data, it considers it like a dependency as changed, and so it's just gonna re-trigger the rendering. It's how React works. Now everything should work, and look at this. If I type the org, I get the name, the description, and the series, which is amazing. Amazing. That is the amazing Spider-Man, and it's also responsive. I mean, what else can you get? Americas. Oh yeah, I remember. Yesterday I went to see Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness. There was this character, like America something. America what? Vasquez? Something. And I didn't know her. And she was quite interesting actually. But yeah, doesn't exist here. What if I type Strange? Oh yeah. Yeah, this is not, yeah, okay. This is not Doctor Strange, guys. And this is not Doctor Strange because you're looking for the initials. The name starts with. And this is actually Stranger, which is an interesting character. I'd love to know more about this old bodybuilder man, which looks like a magician as well. But what I want is actually Doctor Strange. Okay, oh yeah, this is network, guys, don't worry. This is just my network that is very slow. And if I type on it, I can see Doctor Strange. Look at this handsome guy. Alright, it works. Nice. I think that one last thing that we need to add is just the attribution. Maybe Marvel will get like pissed if we don't do it, so let's do it. It's gonna be very simple. We can just add a footer with their attribution. Yeah, let's just add a footer element, maybe a footer component, yeah. And as you notice, I'm putting it outside the routes, so this will be displayed basically on every page. I'm creating the component, and inside I will just put whatever the attribution needs to be. Chavez, America Chavez. Did I say Vasquez? Sorry. And we can wrap around this like an an anchor tag. And we can set link to go, yeah, there. And don't forget to put the target as blank so that you open it in another page. Now, of course, we don't see it because I didn't import it and I didn't save this file. Now I'm gonna do it. Should be somewhere. There it is. Look at that. Let's just give it some styling, just for good measure. I don't think I'll do something, yeah, just maybe some text align, yeah, and some spacing on the top. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, and it moved. Nice. So now if I look for anything, it's gonna load inside the grid. Yeah, and that is going to the bottom. Nice. And that is gonna stay there for the page as well. Well, we did our job. We behaved as good API citizens. The attribution is there. Everything is done. Anyway, this is it. I think everything is finished, is completed. And let me know in the comments below, what did you think about this project? Was it too easy? Was like too not so easy? And also what you'd like to see next. I'll see you at the next one, or the next episode. If you haven't done so, please leave a like and share, and also don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you at the next one. Ciao, ciao.